Yes.
We were looking at the letter from Carol Grayson, and you said that that letter didn't get to you. Looking back, is that a letter you would have wanted to see?
I think I was aware of Mrs. Grayson's interest and commitment to these issues. As far as I can recollect, she was part of the Haemophilia Action Group and therefore was, very passionate about these issues. So I would have thought that letter might have come to me because she made some very powerful points in that letter.
And the points that she made, that people had been tested without their consent, etc., were those allegations that you were aware of from other sources?
Not that I can recall.
So even if the letter didn't come to you, would you think it was important that the fact that somebody was making such serious allegations, apparently in relation to more than one person, she says a number of people, should have come to you?
I would have thought it would, because it raised a number of serious issues in addition to the testing issue as well.
Now, I asked you a question about whether or not you might have changed your mind about having a public inquiry if that letter had come to you. And I've been asked to point out and really just put on the record what you say in your witness statements at para 3.19 and 3.20. We don't need to turn it up, but in there you say that officials have been made aware that the GMC were investigating allegations, that were investigating those allegations. And so that you say in your witness statement that for that reason you don't think that those allegations would have just justified a public inquiry.
Yep, that was, if you like, another reason why perhaps a public inquiry was not appropriate at that stage, because the GMC, obviously an important regulatory body, actually looking at those allegations.
Did you tell the Society, Haemophilia Society, at the June meeting, excuse me, that you considered that its report was flawed because it talked about compensation, general damage, etc., borrowing from the Canadian model rather than talking about an ex gratia scheme?
I can't recall the details of the conversation, but I think I'd made clear my concerns when I got the letter and when I got the report and I looked at the whole of the report. I can't recall whether I actually said that to the Society in that meeting, and I don't think there is a note of the meeting, is there?
No, I don't think there is. Or if there is, we haven't found it.
Yeah.
So when you say you made clear your concerns, could that have been to officials?
Yes, it could have been.
And equally, the question is, did you tell Mr. Connaty about your concerns that the report was fundamentally flawed when he was pressing you for a response?
I can't recall a specific conversation about that, and if there's no documentary support for it, but I think that I was pretty clear about the reasoning on those issues.
Are you aware of any examples where individuals or groups of individuals, other than those infected blood victims, have used the Macfarlane Trust as a precedent to get compensation without proving fault?
Could you repeat that for me?
Yes, it's the precedent point. Are you aware of the Macfarlane Trust being used as a precedent, as the department feared, for getting compensation without proving fault, other than by those that have been infected by blood with hepatitis C?
I'm not aware of groups other than the people who were affected by hepatitis C who did refer to the Macfarlane and Eileen Trusts as a precedent. I'm not aware of other groups.
if the Society's proposals, that again, this is going back to the Haemophilia Society, if their proposals in their report have been costed at say half the amount, so 250 million pounds over 5 years, would you have been more inclined to agree to that? Was the question the cost?
No, I think there were two issues. One was the significant cost of £500 million, but the other issue was around acknowledging compensation without fault. So I think that those two issues taken together were quite important. You gave some views about the differences between HIV and hepatitis C, and you made some comments about available treatment. Were you aware that non-A, non-B was also a new disease and there was no initial treatments other than interferon for hepatitis C in the 1990s? Yes, certainly I was aware, and certainly I am from the documentation, that hepatitis C, I don't think, was formally recognised until 1989. Before that, it was known as non-A, non-B. And so I was aware of that, myself and from the papers.
And that some people were unable to take interferon, they couldn't tolerate it. And so for those people, there was no treatment in the same way that there was no treatment in those early days for those with HIV.
Yes, I from the papers that I've read and from my recollection, obviously treatments were developing and improving. Whether it was, I know that there was a problem with ribavirin. Some people couldn't tolerate that, and then there was pegylated interferon. But I do think that there was a difference between the treatments that were available for hepatitis C and the fact that there was no treatment for HIV. I think that was a difference. Just on that point, perhaps I could just make a point, really. I was responsible for the hepatitis C strategy that we developed in the department that was published in August 2002, I think. And the main thrust of that strategy was really to provide better services, better treatment, better support, counselling, all the things that were needed for people with hepatitis C. It wasn't going to solve every problem, but I was passionately committed to that because I recognised that people with hepatitis C had found themselves in dreadful conditions through no fault of their own. And that strategy, and I say in my witness statement, for once there was a strategy that came forward that was a true strategy. There was extra funds, money was given to the primary care trusts, there would be strategic specialist centres in every part of the country. The debate that I'd had with Gary Streeter had really caused me to, wake up to the fact that in parts of England, he highlighted the southwest, but the services were appalling for people with hepatitis C, and something needed to be done about that. Now, that would inevitably cost money, and I'm not saying there was a direct comparison between the £500 million that the Society was saying, but actually there was also the need, a pressing need, to get on with that Hep C strategy and try and improve services for the majority of people.
Given that you had no experience of thinking about the threshold for a public inquiry, did you take any steps to inform yourself about the threshold so you could make a decision about whether or not it was appropriate to have a public inquiry?
Well, you rightly say that I had no experience of being involved with the decisions about whether a public inquiry should be held or not. I wasn't aware that there were specific criteria. For me, this would be a decision taken by the Secretary of State. It would be a major decision. I could have fed into that decision, but I'm not aware particularly of having done so.
How do questions in the Commons and Lords bear on whether or not to have a public inquiry?
I think questions in the Commons and in the Lords are really important when you're a minister. It's a way of keeping in touch. It's a way of exploring issues that perhaps you wouldn't do if you hadn't been asked a question. I think it's a constitutional responsibility to reply to your colleagues in the most open way that you can. I think they're a very important part of governance, and there is a responsibility on you to consider the things that your colleagues are putting forward, and not just in the Commons, but also in the Lords, because there are an awful lot of people in the Lords who are knowledgeable, who have experience. I think about Alf Morris, you know, indefatigable campaigner on all of these issues, probably knew far more about it than many of us did, and, you know, fought for a long, long time on behalf of the people who found themselves, unfortunately, in these circumstances. So, you know, I had the highest regard for my colleagues and the parliamentary process. It was very important.
So those are the questions I'm going to ask from call participants. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't think I do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's no questions from behind me. Is there anything you would like to say?
All I wanted to say was to thank you, Sir Brian, and all your colleagues for the way in which you're conducting this inquiry. And that's not in relation to me, but the fact that you have taken the explicit decision to involve the people who are affected and infected as a core part of this inquiry, I think is a fundamental principle. And I'm, you know, delighted that you have chosen to do that, because I think it reminds all of us of our responsibilities and our commitment to the people that we serve.
It was and remains the first principle of this inquiry to listen to people, whoever they may be. We've listened to you today. Can I thank you for your stamina? You've had a long day. So too have those listening, but it's much worse, I think, for people who sit where you do. So thank you for that and for giving your answers. It's been very helpful.
Thank you very much. And I now have a train to go back to Cumbria, so it'll be quite a long day, but I'm very pleased to have been part of this. Thank you.
So tomorrow we hear the evidence of Dr. Robert McQuiston, who will be giving evidence remotely.
Yes.
I don't think it will be a full day tomorrow.
He'll be giving evidence remotely from Northern Ireland.
From Northern Ireland.
From Northern Ireland, yes. 10 o'clock tomorrow. 10 o'clock.